Hello, and welcome back to Replay, the show where games are art. Last time we learned the origin of the Espers and saw Kefka kill a bunch of them and General Leo. We're now done with Thomasa and ready to head out. The question is, where? Luckily, the game lets us know with another cutscene. The speed with which Kefka and Gestalt get to the statues is kind of ridiculous, but then they've probably already killed all of the most aggressive and combative Espers. And Kefka's got that Esper insta-kill ability. Who's left to stop them? And we do know that they get to the statues almost immediately, so that seems the only explanation for this sequence where the floating island forms. Killing, I should note, Imperial citizens. It's the island to the east of the Empire, the one where the sealed cave was, that's ripped out of the ground to form the floating island. More accurately, they appear to have ripped the Esper world through that island. Merely reaching the statues seems to have given them the power to alter the face of the world. This blew my mind when I was a kid. And certainly by the time the floating island is fully in the air, they've reached the statues. Point is, what Strago says here is thus completely believable. Screwing with the statues has already caused an entire continent to rip itself apart. It's easy to believe that screwing with them further could trash the whole planet. So first off, let's put together our party for the next chunk of game. I like Terra, Mog, and Realm for this. As you'll see, if we only have 3 people when we reach the floating continent, Shadow joins us, and later Celeste replaces him, so a group of 3 that doesn't include her is best, in my opinion. I'll just cut out the boring equipment sort of thing. Now, this means all 3 female characters and the 1 non-human we have in our party will be my group, and there's a reason for that. Mog's dance ability is one of the most powerful available to us and clearly magical, and the 3 most powerful casters are the 3 female characters. The next most powerful caster? Strago, an old man. Now look at our enemies. Another old man and a clown. The 2 other people in the world with magical power equal to or greater than ours. All the healthy, attractive young men in our party, however, they use swords or tools or martial arts. They're gamblers or thieves, but until we start equipping them with magicite, none of them are the least bit magical. What's going on here? And before that, however, let's talk about what's happening in the game at this precise moment. We're fighting the Imperial Air Force, really the ultimate expression of the Empire's aesthetic and ethos. It's nothing but machines, designed solely to destroy and to kill, being fielded in defense of quite simply the most powerful people in the world. The IAF doesn't stand a chance against us, but they're still made, by discipline or patriotic fervor or fear of punishment, to throw themselves against us to die, to defend people who don't need their defense. That's the ultimate expression of empire, the complete devaluation of not only the lives of the other, but the lives of your own people. It reduces people to 3 categories: the powerful who consume, the enemy who are to be subjugated, and resources to be consumed for the benefit of the powerful. That's power and order. People made into things, things valued above people. But yeah, this goes on for a while while some swirly thing works its way around the hull. It's a pretty cool sequence to play by the standards of the time, but not the most interesting to watch or talk about. And eventually, somehow, for no reason, Ultros. Because that's what Ultros does. He shows up out of nowhere to be a boss fight when game logic says there should be one, but story logic hasn't provided one. He's telling the truth about this being the last battle with him, however. You never fight him again after this. Because, well, he's gone from a minor threat to nothing. Basically helpless as we riddle him with lightning. But then he brings in Chupon, and things get interesting. Chupon, you see, is the result of translating a name across 3 languages, Greek to Japanese to English. He's actually Typhon, the scion of Gaia and Tartarus, the earth and the underworld, the deadliest being that ever lived according to Greek mythology. He was defeated by Zeus's thunderbolt, but that's not what's interesting for us. What's interesting to us is that he's a brother to the Titans, the primordial gods that the Olympians, led by Zeus, overthrew. Typhon was born after the rest of the Titans, but had similar parentage and was imprisoned in Tartarus with them after his death. So, an ancient sealed god shows up to defend Ultros. And at the end of this fight, we're going to be flung from the airship. An utterly ridiculous opponent who we've beaten several times before gets the aid of ancient sealed gods, and at the end we're flung from the airship. If you've played the game before, this should sound familiar. You see, just like the last time we fought him, this Ultros fight does serve a story purpose. Specifically, it's foreshadowing what's going to happen with Kefka at the end of the floating island. Ultros continues to be the character Kefka pretends to be. Comedy relief villain who gets trounced repeatedly, grotesque in appearance but never really a threat. Keep that word in mind in a few minutes. Grotesque. And then we get an utterly pointless boss fight. Meh. So after we land, there's Shadow being dour as usual. I'm just gonna cut out the part where I equip him. Now this is interesting. Right off the bat, you have an encounter with a Behemoth. In past and most future Final Fantasy games, Behemoths are endgame enemies. Further in are chests with weapons like Sasuke and Murasame, legendary or endgame weapons from past FFs. There's a major difficulty spike here too. This is a lot harder than most of the random encounters up to this point. The treasure and enemies are essentially positioning this as the game's final dungeon. Which, honestly, isn't that far-fetched. I'm a bit under 13 hours in, and I played this game a lot. A less experienced player might take 20 hours to get here. which isn't that much shorter than, say, Final Fantasy IV. And in a sense, this is Endgame. This is the final battle to avert the apocalypse, which has been a major element in past FFs and will be a major element in future ones. The thing is, for the first time in the series, this game isn't about averting the apocalypse, which, believe it or not, ties into how freaking ugly the monsters here are. Like I said last time, magic quite closely resembles nuclear weapons and nuclear power in this game, while both the monsters and the Thomasins resemble the mutants in the typical post-apocalyptic setting. And the thing about mutants is, well, they tend to be grotesque, don't they? Monstrous. Think of the science fiction classic Them and its giant ants, or Godzilla, created by the power of the atomic bomb, or Tetsuo mutating horribly in Akira. The product of psychic powers rather than radiation or magic, true, but psychic powers are basically the same thing as magic, and as depicted in Akira, the product of science run amok, which is pretty much the same idea as how nuclear power is depicted in Them or Godzilla. So nuclear power creates abominations, grotesqueries. Let's unpack that a bit, shall we? The grotesque, as Mikhail Bakhtin famously argued while discussing the work of Rabelais, is the aesthetic of carnival. Traditionally, the medieval carnival was a time when the normal social order is upended. Nobles waited on their servants, social institutions like the church were mocked, the high was made low, the sacred profaned. The grotesque is that which occurs at the boundaries of culture. It contains that which we all know is a part of us but try to hide or not think about. Excrement, blood, entrails. It's the distortion of natural form. Creatures assembled from bits of unrelated animals. Humans with their proportions distorted or monstrous faces. It's closely related to the uncanny valley. Japan doesn't have the same kind of carnival tradition, but it still has this notion of the grotesque existing on the borders and in the shadows of civilization, in the form of yokai, a term which can be variously translated as spirit, monster, fairy, or any of a number of related concepts. Examples of yokai include the old woman who killed her daughter and became a mountain hag, the fox which lived too long and became a being of great power, ogres that punish undutiful children, creatures made of pottery shards that punish chefs who don't dispose of their broken crockery properly, and one monster that licks the ceilings of dirty bathrooms. These are beings which break the rules, or which punish those who break the rules. They are the creatures which mark the boundaries, the places where the world of normal social order and wilderness, danger, and spirit collide. But by its very nature as something which exists at boundaries and points of juxtaposition, the grotesque becomes liminal and shares in the power of liminality. The grotesque is magical. In many cultures, it is things which are malformed that carry the most magical potential or power. To take another yokai example, a cat which grows a second tail becomes a dangerous creature with great powers of illusion. The grotesque has power, and, Foucault argues in his own theory of the grotesque, power is always grotesque because it pushes and distorts. The powers that be are able to declare certain things abnormal, and thus define themselves as normal, while at the same time punishing the abnormal by putting them through grotesque experiences, such as prison or poverty. Final thing to talk about in talking about the grotesque is abjection. We're familiar with the ideas of subject and object. I am a subject, a thinking, feeling being that has a point of view. A rock is an object, possessing none of those traits. As described by literary theorist Julia Kristeva, the abject is that which blurs that distinction. For example, I am used to thinking of myself as an identity, a subject that experiences the world. But if I am reminded that I am a body, a thing, an object, say by seeing someone cut open in a horror movie, I experience abjection and will instinctively try to reject what I see, responding with revulsion. Abjection, basically, is the feeling which underlies the aesthetic that is the grotesque. But remember, the grotesque is the aesthetic of carnival, the aesthetic of crossing social barriers. Abjection is about those same barriers. There's a reason homophobes and prudes use words like disgusting to describe public displays of affection they disapprove of. They're experiencing abjection through the crossing of social barriers. Which brings us back around to Foucault and his ideas of grotesque power. Through abjection, we can see how social norms and individual attitudes interact to produce a sense of what is and is not grotesque, so that the grotesque can be forced outside. So, what is normal? What do we as a culture define as abnormal so that it can be subjected to institutional power? Children are abnormal, their rights restricted because they lack what we regard as a normal level of judgment and experience. The elderly are abnormal, shoved away into nursing homes. Both arise from our abject horror at the idea of aging, that reminder that we are just things subject to the decay of time. The mentally ill are abnormal. In fact, Foucault built his entire theory of grotesque power around how we treat the mentally ill. Again, it's because they remind us that we are things, that our very thoughts are subject to chemical and physical changes. And women are abnormal, which is why medical schools teach diseases specific to people assigned male at birth to general practitioners, but only specialists learn how to deal with diseases specific to people assigned female at birth. We express it in different ways, but on a cultural level, we regard children, the elderly, and women, among others, as being grotesque, monstrous. Look at the Children of the Corn or Rosemary's Baby, at the Old Mountain Hag or the Witch. Look at Alien, an entire movie franchise about a monster that impregnates men. Put another way, we see healthy young cis men as normal, while the old, the sick, children, and women are all grotesque distortions of that form. Now, before we go any further, I want to be clear here. I'm talking about cultural attitudes. I'm not saying this is how it should be. I'm not saying that I think that women, the elderly, the mentally ill, or children should be regarded with disgust and horror. Well, maybe children. But, well, a lot of our horror is based on that very idea, isn't it? It's hard not to be influenced by one's culture, hard not to internalize these responses. That's why it's so important to be mindful of them, so that you can recognize them in yourself and try to unlearn them. So, given our list of what is grotesque, look again at who gets magic. Monsters do, and they're grotesque by definition. The mutant descendants of the nuclear war do. Again, even if they don't look it on the outside, that's clearly playing with the idea of the grotesque. And out of the named characters, Terra, Celeste, Gestalt, and Kefka all use magic qua magic. 2 women, an old man, and an insane clown. There's that carnival popping up again. Realm and Strago get abilities which are explicitly stated to be magical in nature, derived from their mutant heritage. A child and another old man. Gao gets monsters' abilities, including magical ones. Another child, one raised by monsters at that. Mog's dances are very much like magic too, and while adorable, he is still a monster. Saban's blitzes sometimes resemble magic, such as Fire Dance and Aura Beam, and characters frequently comment on how excessively muscular he is, to the point that Terra comments that she didn't think he was human at first. He's closer to the normal form, but still a distortion, and so his abilities are magic-like, but ultimately physical. Everyone else's special abilities either use purely physical skills, like Cien and Locke, or specialized equipment or items, like Edgar and Shadow. Even Setsu's slots are represented as him relying on luck rather than any power he himself possesses. Note that every slot ability involves someone or something else coming in to help. No, it's inescapable. Magic is fundamentally tied to the grotesque in this game. Normal people don't have magic. And note how frequently Terra declares herself to not be normal. And then you've got Atma Weapon. The line about being pure energy is actually a clue. One of the ways to beat him is to suck away all his MP, at which point he dies. However, since only one member of my party has Rasp, it's not a great plan for me. God, this battle music is so good. But just look at this creature. He's got a lizard-like body, a wolf-like head, a bizarre tangle of horns and spikes. Each of his shoulders has 2 legs coming off of it, one of them weirdly spindly, almost tentacle-like. He's one of the most grotesque monsters we've fought so far, and pure magic. Because he's pure magic, it's very important to get Shell on as much of the party as possible. Oh sure, Mog finally starts with the healing dances once Shadow's dead. He is just determined not to let Shadow live, isn't he? Ah, I seem to have damaged him enough that he started pulling out the big guns. Wow, and Realm is out of MP. I don't think that's happened to me before on this playthrough. And there with those spinning gears or fans or whatever they are, we get the reveal. Atma Weapon isn't a monster, it's a machine. It has the same name as the sword because they are both weapons created from the being Atma Weapon thinks it is, Atma, who is called Ultima in later games. But where a sword is just an object, this is a grotesquerie. It's a living thing merged with a machine, or a machine come to life. It speaks, it fights, it presents evidence of subjectivity, but it's a machine, an object, and so are we. That reminder is the essence of abject horror, which is precisely what Atma Weapon evokes. Especially because almost 600 damage to the entire party is nothing to sneeze at. Thank goodness for Mog pulling out that sun bath. Shadow actually got to survive an attack. And Realm is out of magic again. I know that I haven't run out of magic twice in one battle before. Honestly, with his special battle music, unique attacks, and pre-battle boasting, Atma Weapon feels a lot like some of the more out-of-nowhere final bosses in the series. It just contributes to the endgame feeling here. Atma Weapon feels like an endgame boss, like maybe we go from this to fighting Kefka and then Gestalt, and that's the end of the game. And finally, down he goes. And Shadow leaves, because Shadow. And just beyond him, Kefka, Gestalt, and the statues. Here's where it all starts coming together, and why I've been talking about the grotesque, because it actually ties very closely to the ideas of order and chaos I've talked about in past episodes. Celeste, who remember is a general associated with ice and heaven, a representative of good order against the Empire's evil order, joins us to try to stop them. Note she calls their actions madness, grotesque behavior in other words, behavior that crosses the line of what is acceptable or normal. But remember Foucault, the power of the state, of the social order, lies in its ability to declare what is abnormal and what is normal. Gestalt is the state. He is able to easily toss Celeste aside, stop us in our tracks. And yet the power of the state is itself grotesque. Calls Celeste my pretty, which is just skeevy and gross. He and Kefka give her a ridiculously unappealing pitch, but it's an appeal to her sense of order, the idea that she would be in a hierarchy, not at the top, but not at the bottom either. But Kefka wants her to betray and murder her friends, an even more grotesque act. And in that moment, she truly recognizes the grotesquerie of power. Note that she attacks Kefka, not Gestalt. She still instinctively sees the representative of chaos as her primary enemy. Kefka demonstrates why he's the best villain in the series. This whole game, Kefka has been pathetic. Sadistic and murderous, yes, but when we first met him in Figaro, we humiliated him. In the Imperial base, we repeatedly tromped him and he ran away. At Narsh, he put up a fight, but we beat him. And in Thamasa, he took us out with ease, slaughtered the Espers and Leo, and walked off. And yet, he's still pathetic. But that's what makes him dangerous. He's cowardly, selfish, sadistic, and possessed of immense power. He's not an ancient being bent on revenge or a primordial force. He's just a petty bully who finds himself getting hold of ultimate power. And that's terrifying, because that's real. And yet the goddesses grant him their power. Why? That's where the connection between the grotesque and power and apocalypse and carnival is finally made. See, our cultural power structures are built on the idea of normal and abnormal. The idea that women, children, the elderly, the ill are abnormal and should be punished is abhorrent. It's wrong. But it's the order of things. To change it, we must turn away from order. So magic, the power of the grotesque, of the margins, of the marginalized, becomes the force of chaos that lies in the hands of the abnormal. It is that which pushes back against the social order, that which says, no, this is unacceptable and must be changed. The Empire is that order, that oppression, that control. Gestalt's magic must eventually betray him. As, of course, it does. The statues choose Kefka over him. They choose to upend the order of the world, to end the Empire, to begin the apocalypse. Brings us to what's about to happen. Apocalypse. It's often commented on that the modern-day, mostly American-based, apocalypse-obsessed branch of Christianity seems to actually want it to happen. They talk about it with excitement, this idea of a great war where they'll be able to prove themselves, where they'll be rewarded and see their enemies suffer. What's forgotten is that this is, well, normal. That's how apocalypses work. Hard as it is for anyone else to believe, given their disproportionate social and political power, the Christian right thinks they're oppressed. They want the apocalypse to come because they believe it means the end of a system under which they perceive themselves as suffering. Go back and read the book of Daniel or Revelation and you'll see the same thing. One is about Jews suffering under Seleucid rule, spinning tales about a past apocalypse that overthrew their Babylonian oppressors as a thinly veiled way of expressing hope it would happen to the Seleucids too. The other is about Christians suffering under Roman rule, spinning tales about a future apocalypse that will overthrow their Babylonian oppressors as a thinly veiled way of expressing hope it would happen to the Romans. The apocalypse is just a metaphor for revolution. After all, our world is made of social norms and practices as much or more as it's made of anything else. Destroying and transforming those is an apocalyptic change. The apocalypse is just revolution seen from above. It's total carnivalization of everything. Makes sense that a clown would be in charge of it. The problem, of course, is that there's more than one way to deal with abjection and grotesque power. Most revolutions, maybe all of them, just shuffle around who gets to be the oppressor and who gets to be oppressed. For now, it's Kefka that has the power. Kefka, who is the fulcrum of change, the bringer of revolution, king of the carnival. And the result is this unprecedented defeat. This spectacle of entire continents tearing apart in chains of explosions. Not an apocalypse averted, not a near apocalypse. Full, actual apocalypse. And on that day, the world was changed forever.